From the basement of La Penta, this is WICR.
Hello everyone, welcome back to the Sports Vault. Jersey Joe and Big Shot Rob rolling along, and it's time to talk everyone's favorite distraction, Alex Rodriguez. Now, we invited our friend Armand, a big Alex Rodriguez fan, to come on and talk a little bit, but he is currently busy. Now, Rob, his name in the news again yesterday. He will be submitted to more drug testing this season than pretty much any other player, and for me, I have no problem with it, but I'll read you the quote. Rob Manfred, the new commissioner, saying, "Let me be clear about this. He'll be tested exactly like every other player who has violated the program. The program requires more frequent testing for players who are coming back after a suspension." So, Rob, let me ask you, any problems with this?
No, I don't have a problem with it. You know what, Joe? Because you have to check. Make sure he's not juicing. Because you know what? The Yankees, if he's continuing to juice and he gets suspended again, the Yankees shouldn't have to pay his contract anymore. Because it's coming down to this point where you got to make sure this guy's not taking steroids. Everybody has to play the game the same way. Everybody's being tested in the league. And if people aren't being tested positive, he shouldn't be testing positive. So you know what? I totally agree with the commissioner going after him.
So do I. Here's the saddest thing for me about A-Rod playing this year, Rob, is the way I look at it. And we talked a little bit about this when we did some TV spots yesterday. And I want to ask you, because you weren't on that panel, but the reason I think A-Rod is on this team is to be a ratings booster, to be honest. The Yankees have clearly shown several times they're not happy about it. I think the only reason he's really here is to be the ratings booster, because numbers are down. People aren't going to be watching as much because, let's be honest, this isn't a great Yankees team. The outlook on the season doesn't look too great. I honestly feel like he's here for the ratings, and to me, that's sad.
Joe, you know what? I agree with you partially about that one with the ratings. You know what? The ratings really went down last year. Even though it was Derek Jeter's last year, ratings really hit a low, and MLB really is hitting lows with it because you know what? People are saying the games are too long. I'll even admit to it. It's hard to watch 9 innings. My grandfather does it, but I say to him, I'm like, how do you do that? I can watch maybe watch an inning or two. But the other reason with A-Rod why he's still on this team, nobody wants him. And you know what? If you even cut him, you're still going to get hit with a tax from his contract. And so at the end of the day, you have to keep this guy on your team. That's the biggest issue.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, like, if you look at it from a playing standpoint, he can do something for this team. Because let's be honest, I mean, I don't think I have a lot of problems with the pitching. I think they did a good job filling out the bullpen. And you've got there's a lot of hypotheticals you've got to consider when you look at the starting rotation in terms of health and injuries and stuff like that. But I think when you look at the hitting, I just don't know if you can expect anyone to hit on this team. We saw it last year. I don't think you can look at this lineup and be significantly convinced that this is going to be a club who's going to get a lot of consistent hitting.
Joe, there's nobody on this roster who's even going to hit 30 home runs. And that's the saddest thing I have to say this year because you know what? Yankee Stadium, you're so used to seeing people like Granderson blasting 35 to 40 home runs. Teixeira putting up numbers like that. Teixeira, Joe's going to be a guy who puts up maybe 20 home runs this year, 70 RBIs. Carlos Beltran is going to be a guy who puts up maybe 15 home runs. A-Rod's going to put up maybe 15. And it's going to be sad. It's going to be a very low home run count at Yankee Stadium this year. The person who I think might lead the Yankees this year in home runs is Chase Headley. That's about it.
I mean, and it's interesting because we've seen more and more now kind of the Yankees getting to that point where they're blurring that line between mediocrity and just losing. And I think that's a terrible spot to be in because we saw the Phillies try that. They kind of tried to stay in that part where they were still relevant, but they wouldn't admit that they were losing. And look where the Phillies are now. They are a mess. I think it's a terrible situation to be in. When you don't see a light at the end of the tunnel and you know you can't legitimately compete for a World Series title, I just think you've got to put it all in the farm system right now. I mean, hopefully that's what they're doing because they're not going to be good again until they start developing young guys. I mean, that's why the Cardinals are the Cardinals. That's why they're just in their own. In Tampa Bay, why they were in their own, because their farm system's just continually bringing up talent. Look at the Cubs, what they've done with their farm system. And the Tampa Bay, unfortunately for them, just couldn't retain their players because of their payroll.
Yeah.
But, I mean, if you're a team like the Cardinals who can hold on to these, I mean, look at the way that they just traded Alan Craig like he's just a chip who can be used. Because they can replace an Alan Craig like that. This is where they need to get back to, and I don't know when it's going to happen.
Yeah, Joe, it's going to be a real struggle going down the stretch. Now it's the time where I go, Joe, as a Yankee fan, you start trading guys away. Try to get some farm system players. I mean, you're not going to get top priority players, hands down. You're not getting top 100. But try to get some people like the way Oakland did it, Joe. You know, Oakland even admit they're not getting top players with the trades they made. Even we look at the Josh Donaldson trade. But get players, because you know what? If they could develop, you could eventually become champions. I mean, going back, you bring up the point with the Phillies, Joe. That was a failed experiment from the start. Even when they were winning, they couldn't even win it with the best pitching duo, and then they fell apart. This Yankees team, we watch as, you know what? Age is a number now. Once you hit a certain age, you're seeing the decline, and the Yankees need to be that team who is between that 25 to 30 age range, and you know what? They're just not that at this point.
They are not. Well, one of the really cool things that I wanted to talk about is the other day ESPN coming out with their top 10 right-handed starters, top 10 left-handed starters, and it's kind of cool. Rob, I'll read you the top 10. You tell me if you think any of these placements are off a little bit. Number 1 for top 10 right-handed starters, they have Felix Hernandez, Max Scherzer, Corey Kluber, Johnny Cueto, Steven Strasburg, Zach Greinke, Jordan Zimmermann, Adam Wainwright, Matt Harvey, and Jose Fernandez at 10. Any problems with the placement there?
Yeah, Jordan Zimmermann. How is he that low, Joe?
At number 7, yeah.
Jordan Zimmermann was phenomenal last year. And if it wasn't for his coach pulling him out of a game in a stupid decision,
Matt Williams,
the Nationals would have been possibly in the World Series last year. And you know what? I mean, he's a terrific player. The Kluber, you know what? Don't get me wrong. He was AL Cy Young last year, but I don't see him as an amazing pitcher. He's not.
His numbers were nothing spectacular. I think it had more to do with there was really not a standout pitcher in the AL last year.
No, not really whatsoever. And you know what? Zimmerman should be third on that list. You know what? I'm fine with having Felix Hernandez at the top. Felix Hernandez is one of the best pitchers I've seen so far in the American League the last couple years. The guy, you know what? Doesn't get run support, but manages to keep his team in games. Will give up maybe 1 or 2 runs a game. And kid's phenomenal. Max Scherzer's another one who he's a real workhorse. He goes to the Nationals now. Probably now the best pitching staff ever in baseball. These guys have a solidified starting rotation. Don't really have that great of a batting order, but you know what? In the National League, pitching wins games.
I'm with you, and let me ask you this, because I don't know, maybe it's my bias as a Dodgers fan, but for me at 6 for Zach Greinke, I don't know if I would put him below Johnny Cueto and Steven Strasburg. What do you say, though?
You know what? I like Greinke. Greinke's phenomenal. What he's done in L.A., he's really stepped it up. I didn't expect the performances I've been seeing out of him, but I kind of like Johnny Cueto ahead of him, Joe. You know what? Last season, if Cueto actually had run support, he would have been a 20-game winner. And Cueto's another one who's a workhorse. He goes the distance, but just doesn't have an offense behind him. Greinke has the run support, and you know what? That's why I will keep Cueto ahead of him.
I think that's solid reasoning. And I watched Cueto a bunch last year. He pitched really well. He did. I mean, the Reds had a really weird season with Joey Votto's injury and everything that happened with them. So the run support thing was definitely a factor. And I definitely don't. I think we're seeing now where we're not really looking as much at the win-loss, because for a lot of these terrific pitchers like King Felix, like the Jose Fernandez's, they've been on teams that just don't produce that run support, and their numbers are still terrific. Now, the guy on this list who it seems like everyone now has an opinion on is Steven Strasburg. He's kind of been a guy who's been hard to figure out because the numbers are still very good, but the win-loss is one of those things where it's not great. What do you think? What is Steven Strasburg? Is he an elite pitcher right now?
At some points he is. I'll put him at some points, Joe. Strasburg will have those great games, but he'll get over 10 strikeouts. You know, he's a guy before he went down with Tommy John surgery, unhittable. Remember, Joe, when he first came up into the MLB, he was picking up 15 strikeout games, 17 strikeout games. you know what? He is an elite pitcher, but to a point, because you know what? He still has to deal with getting the wins and losses, kind of fixing that, making himself really strong with his win column. And once he could overcome getting over his losses, I could say he's a really elite pitcher. I mean, you know what? Look at it this way, Joe. Last year, the Nationals, the offense really wasn't that great. Bryce Harper was injured, really took a drop in his numbers, and the Nationals, who they really have, they don't have that big superstar on the team on offense. You know what? You could say Adam LaRoche has been big. He's the guy who puts up 25 homers, 100 RBIs. But, I mean, there's really not that offensive player on that team.
There's not. I think really good points. So, before we get to the left-handers, at the end of the day, you're a GM. Your job is dependent on this. You need to win a game. You taking Max Scherzer or you taking King Felix?
Oh, King Felix in a heartbeat. I'm sorry. King Felix has been the greatest pitcher so far for Seattle. The guy just works the innings, works his counts, and phenomenal. Just pure phenomenal. Look, if he was on the Yankees, Joe, imagine how many wins he would have had over the last couple of years. Probably a guy, you know what, I may be going a little bit out of my mind. Probably a guy who would have won 23 games every season with the Yankees.
I'm with you. If that guy, and that's one of the amazing things. I mean, I think when in the conversation of best pitcher in the league, he's probably number 2. I mean, I still put Clayton Kershaw number 1. Mm-hmm. But I mean, if you gave this guy runs for even the year he won the Cy Young, the win-loss wasn't great. But I mean, you got to take into account the run support thing. The numbers are just outstanding. Let's segue a little bit though into the top 10 left-handed starters. Again, I'll read it to you and you knock them down. Number 1, of course, Clayton Kershaw, the reigning MVP, Cy Young winner for the National League. Chris Sale, Madison Bumgarner, David Price, John Lester, Cole Hamels, Hyun-Jin Ryu, Gio Gonzalez, Drew Smyly, and Francisco Liriano. Rob, any problems with the placement once again?
Madison Bumgarner should be number 2, or he should be number 1.
Wow, you would even put him over Kershaw?
Yeah,
Rob,
I know he's your guy.
Trying to get me into a fight here?
If Kershaw could beat the Cardinals, Joe, then he will be my number 1 guy. I'm sorry. After what I saw out of Bumgarner last year, that was something a pitcher you don't see him do, Joe. The way he pitched in Game 5 versus Kansas City, went in Game 7, Joe, relieved, and the guy's arm is just phenomenal. He throws pitches where I go, wow. No effort even into his throws, and he still strikes these guys out. He gets ground balls. I mean, I like him as my number 1, and the only reason is, don't get me wrong, Clayton Kershaw, the best pitcher right now in the game. A guy who logs in 200 innings. I sit there sometimes, and I'm like, it's the 9th inning, and he has 96 pitches, and he's phenomenal. But when he could just overcome his playoff problems, the guy has like over a 5 ERA in the playoffs, and he has games where he pitches so great, and then he just falls apart later in the playoffs. Once he could overcome beating the Cardinals, I will keep him as my number 1.
I'm leaving the studio, Rob. We're no longer friends. No, I'm just kidding. I agree with you. I think, I still put Clayton Kershaw 1, but I do think you hit the nail on the head when you say the thing that you've got to like Bumgarner over Kershaw in that department is he's so effortless with his pitches, like you said. He's going to last a very long time, Madison Bumgarner, because the most impressive thing to me is when you watch his pitch mile count, he's not throwing a lot of gas. This is a guy who just has such great control. He's not mechanical with his throws. He's just a guy who's so effortless and does it so well. And Kershaw, the one thing you worry about is longevity for him because he's a guy who's very mechanical with his throws. Every time takes a lot of mechanics to get his pitching motion right. Now, he's as flawless as you could be, but I think when you look at a guy who's built to be good for longer, it's probably Bumgarner because of how effortless he is. But I'm with you. I think I put Kershaw, Bumgarner 1 and 2. I mean, Chris Sale is very good, but I think when you look at guys who've just been so dominant, Bumgarner doing it and winning the World Series, Kershaw, aside from his postseason struggles, I don't know if there's anybody better right now. Now, the bottom two are kind of the interesting ones. I mean, I think you have a really good list going. Once you get to Smiley and Liriano, again, they've been good. I still don't know if I'd put them really in the same. When I look at, like, the top 8, like, I really consider those are the best guys. If I had one of those guys on my team, I'm in pretty good shape. Smiley and Liriano, I don't know. I kind of look at them more like B-plus type guys. What do you say, though?
You know, Smiley's decent, Joe, but Liriano's another one who, if you watch his time with Minnesota, yes, he did have years where he would put up great numbers, but then he would have years where he had like a 4 ERA, 5 ERA, and I really don't see him as a top superb lefty pitcher whatsoever. I mean, yes, he kind of revived his career in Pittsburgh, but he's nothing spectacular to me.
I'm with him. When he had that first season he had with Pittsburgh when he was just outstanding. I mean, they made the postseason. I don't know where that came from. I mean, that was something we really rarely have seen from him. It was good for Pittsburgh, but I don't know. But that was very good stuff. Obviously, the title of this segment's got to be Clayton Kershaw versus Madison Bumgarner. It's a fun debate, and I mean, I don't think the Giants will be as good this year. The Dodgers obviously will still be very good. But look, if they are both on the same mound at the same time, that is going to be a lot of fun to watch. Very good thoughts, though, from Big Shot Rob and Jersey Joe. We will be right back getting into some Cleveland Cavaliers basketball. What a way to end the show.